Hello language learners, welcome back to another book club episode on English with Maddie. Today I am going to be introducing a few of my favorite classic fantasy novels. I love fantasy books. I absolutely adore anything that is magical, mystical, creative, whether it is in our version of Earth and there is a mystical element, or whether it is an entirely new and made up land. Today, I am going to be sharing a few classic fantasy novels. There are so many different kinds of fantasy, and so I will be sharing some more books and recommendations with you in another video. So for today, what better book to start off with than, of course, Harry Potter. So many of you have probably already read, heard of this, or watched the movie. Somehow, I'm sure you know the name Harry Potter. This came out shortly after I was born, and my dad read me the first 3 books out loud as a bedtime story. And then from then on, I read the rest of the books myself, but I still adore this magical world. I think, while many fantasy novels can have very hard and challenging words, and that is true, some of the magical words in the Harry Potter universe are a little bit hard, especially because you cannot look them up in a regular dictionary. But because this book is aimed towards younger readers in English, it is considered a children, adolescents book, this is still relatively attainable, especially the first couple books in the series. The later books get to be quite lengthy, but let's take a peek here. This first book, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, is just over 300 pages. So yes, it is long, but again, it is going to have a little bit easier reading level, and I think is very attainable, at least even just in little segments. You don't have to read it all at once. I think it's possible for you if you are still learning English. So once again, I definitely recommend Harry Potter if you enjoy fantasy novels. The second classic fantasy book I am going to recommend today is The Hobbit. Of course, The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien is the prequel or preface to the very famous trilogy Lord of the Rings. Now, personally, I really enjoyed The Hobbit, and I was not a huge fan of the trilogy. I love the movies. I did not as much enjoy the books, and that is very surprising. I am such a reader, as you know, but I really do recommend The Hobbit as a fantasy lover and for anybody who is still studying English. Or if you're a native speaker, I still recommend The Hobbit. But I think there is something about this book, and it's just the one, right? You read this, you're done. You could continue on to the trilogy if it really intrigued you, if it drew you in. You do not have to. You could definitely just read this book. They are, of course, in a mythical fantasy land. There are maps and descriptions, and it is very fun to learn about all these different characters. But the writing style, even though it is very descriptive, is surprisingly simple. There are not so many crazy words or concepts used. It is a relatively straightforward novel. So if you are interested in fantasy, and especially if you have read this, or if you've seen the movie or anything like that, if you know anything about this world of Middle Earth, I would definitely recommend giving The Hobbit a try. Definitely, the first few chapters are very fun and easy enough to read, so I would recommend this. The next 3 books that I am going to introduce to you on this classic fantasy list are all by the same author. He is one of my favorite all-time authors of fantasy novels. And the first book I will introduce is the first book I ever read from him. The author's name is Orson Scott Card, and the book is called Ender's Game. So you may have heard of the movie. I do not recommend it. It is very different from the book. This book is just phenomenal. It is based off of Earth, but slightly in the future and what might happen, especially if children were to get involved in otherworldly situations. So it is very creative. I read it when I was a young teenager. Actually, maybe I was 12. I do think it is possible for younger readers, adolescents, to enjoy this. I also think it is very enjoyable as an adult. I also think that it's not overly challenging. It is attainable. This book is 200 something, like 230 pages. It's not that long. And the amazing thing is, if you read Ender's Game, if you love it, there is a series that exactly follows the storyline of this book, but from another character's perspective. It's called Ender's Shadow, and it is also so creatively done. So if you do enjoy this, there are so many more books that you can use this as a jumping off point into reading. If this kind of story is not quite your style, there are 2 more books by Orson Scott Card that I want to recommend. The first one is a short series that I absolutely loved, and it is called Homecoming. So Homecoming is a series, I believe there are 4 books in this series, and it is about what would happen if we had so many world wars that we completely demolished our Earth, right? Everything is just in destruction and shambles. And so a group of people gets in a spaceship and jets off to another planet. And so they start another life there. They're living there for so many years, right? They're thriving in this new community. But then over time, our Earth has healed itself. Nature has overtaken all of the destruction and it has come back to a livable place again. And so these people, these ancestors who are living on another planet, begin remembering and they begin feeling this call back to Earth. So it is a very interesting, more sci-fi kind of world. And it also is a very interesting perspective of what might happen if we continue not taking care of our planet. So a little bit more complex of a storyline here, but a very interesting sci-fi kind of novel. The last series I want to introduce to you is also by Orson Scott Card, and it is very interesting because it is quite different from the other books I've mentioned today. This is called Seventh Son. Seventh Son is not that long, again, like 230-ish pages, and it is the story of when America was first settled, when the United States were first being formed. People were coming over from Europe, they were settling down here, creating a life. But in Seventh Son, we have the perspective of what would it have been like if while these settlers were coming in and starting a new life here, what would have happened if some of them had magical powers? What if some of them had capabilities from folklore that were actually possible. So it is kind of more of a, I would say, historical fantasy twist. So whereas Call of Earth is looking at the distant future and Ender's Game is looking at a little bit maybe closer future, this is also looking at Earth, also looking at our Earth, but in the past. So again, all of these books, they are not that long, and Orson Scott Card just has a really lovely writing style. So even though they might be a little bit more challenging to read than something like Harry Potter, that is definitely aimed towards a younger reader, I do think they are a great place to start. And if you do happen to like these books, because they are all in a series, it is possible to continue on reading that series or checking out some of the other series. And of course, the same with Harry Potter. There are of course 7 books in that series. So I really hope you enjoyed this brief look into some more classic fantasy novels that I really enjoy. I have read all of these, so if you have any questions, please leave me a comment down below. I will give you some more information about page number, reading level, a little bit of a summary for each of these books on the English with Maddie website. So if you want to head over, I will leave a link down in the description box. If you liked this video or any of my other videos and don't want to miss them in the future, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified when I post something new. That is all for today. I can't wait to see you guys again next time for another book club video on English with Maddie. Happy studying!